to improving the quality of life in Oregon. The Oregon Forest Resources Institute encouraging you to rediscover Oregon's forests. See for yourself how forest practices are changing.
Tonight on Oregon Field Guide, we take you into the deep blue waters of Crater Lake with NASA scientists as they prepare, believe it or not, for a future trip to the planet Jupiter.
So perhaps this is a woman that the herder knew and he immortalized her on the tree.
Then we're off to Harney County to meet a woman racing against time to document the history behind the tree carvings by long-gone Basque sheep herders. Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Oregon Field Guide. I'm your host, Steve Amon. Our first story involves one of Oregon's best-known scenic wonders. And yet this report isn't really about nature, it's about science. When school children of the future read about space exploration in the 21st century, Oregon will deserve prominent mention. Jim Newman shows us how one of the boldest and innovative space missions is getting its start at Crater Lake.
Here within the deep blue waters of Crater Lake, scientists have begun investigating a nagging mystery of the very distant solar system. A boat full of PhDs working for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory is on the case. They know all their work this summer day will bring them only a tiny step closer to their goal in outer space. And yet, they agree their momentous quest is worth the investment here.
We have to learn certain things here about exploring in a deep, cold, dark ocean. And so these are chores that we have to do on the way.
The exploration now getting underway will end 10 or more years in the future near the planet Jupiter. Locked in orbit around the huge gas planet is a strange moon called Europa. Under Europa's icy crust, there seems to be an ocean far larger than any on Earth.
We are novices in the context of the Europa Ocean. We have never previously dreamed of going to an ocean on another planetary body. So that is an entirely new game.
The Jet Propulsion Laboratory's Dr. Frank Carsey is participating in the Europa project. He says Europa's ocean may be 10 times deeper than any ocean on Earth. Crater Lake, almost 2,000 feet deep, doesn't come close. And yet, preliminary work here is essential as scientists prepare for an infinitely complex, unmanned mission to Europa.
The pressure at the bottom of this lake is 50 atmospheres, and that's a lot of pressure. Coming to Crater Lake is the first step on the way to developing instrumentation. So what we're doing here is simple testing. We're testing a structure under pressure. We're testing a probe at high pressure. We're testing windows that we have put in the probe so that we can take pictures and illuminate through these windows. So we're testing the seal around the windows and the behavior of the windows. And then we're testing a data system, a system that takes information from the cameras and brings it up to the surface.
There's a camera and then there are two lights. Down here in front of the bottom-looking camera, we have a compass, little compass, and a thermometer, so we can read with the camera. And also, it tells us to focus the camera.
We have ignition and liftoff of Atlantis and the Galileo spacecraft bound for Jupiter.
Jupiter, the fifth planet from the Sun, and its moon, Europa, are 500 million miles away from Earth. But the Galileo spacecraft, launched October 18, 1989, lets us examine the planet and its satellites. And since the mid-1990s, Galileo has been sending us phenomenal photographs of Europa and its icy surface.
One important habitat on Europa will be the ice sheet, especially the ice immediately above the ocean. So we are interested in the ice of Europa as well as the ocean of Europa.
Scientists say the chaotic pattern of cracks in Europa's shell of ice convinces them an ocean lies beneath. Jupiter's powerful gravitational pull, the theory goes, produces rising tides on Europa. Huge ocean swells may have created the vast network of fractures in ice that is up to 15 miles thick.
We'll next take that probe to Antarctica, and we will acquire data on processes at the base of the ice sheet of Antarctica, where the ice sheet meets the rock.
Today, the experimental probe lowered into Crater Lake is only a crude mechanical device. But thoroughly testing the primitive probe will help guide design of a sophisticated computerized robot actually capable of exploring Europa.
When we go to Europa, we will be sending data from the probe to the surface, but right now we don't know how. Now, it's possible that we will send some of that data up a glass fiber. Of course, we don't have experience doing the kind of ocean research that we would be doing on Europa, which is completely autonomous systems that are miniaturized and have miniaturized instrumentation on them, have special small computers on them, etc. So there is much we need to learn about the Europa exploration.
Animation provided by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory underscores just how challenging the Europa exploration will be. If the lander successfully avoids steep cliffs and touches down safely, the work will be just beginning. The probe must melt its way through the thick ice, while simultaneously taking pictures and relaying data to the surface. Once the probe makes contact with the ocean below, a robot submarine will take a look around. The tiny robot, operating in a hostile environment 500 million miles from home, must be a masterpiece of design.
When we start getting ready for Europa, in some areas we have to start from scratch. And Crater Lake is really the starting point for getting ourselves to Europa.
Around 2015, if the space probe performs flawlessly, we may for the first time come face to face with extraterrestrial life. And Crater Lake will have played a part in getting human beings to a place far stranger than its own depths.
But one doesn't test, one doesn't trust testing done in a laboratory as much as one trusts testing done out in the field. The real world has always got surprises.
The deepest oceans on Earth have an average depth of 5 or 6 kilometers. Now compare that with the fact that the oceans of Europa may be 90 kilometers deep. If you'd like to find out more on this amazing subject, you can visit the Oregon Field Guide website at www.opb.org. Now it's time to take a look back. So we're off to the remote Steens Mountain of southeastern Oregon, where, as Eric Kane shows us, a Portland woman is racing to document a part of Oregon's history that's quickly disappearing.
100 years ago, scenes like these on Steens Mountain would probably have included sheep. Well into the 20th century, as many as 100,000 domestic sheep grazed up here every summer, tended by men who endured long periods of remote isolation.
The only people on the mountain were sheep herders.
The herders were mostly Basque, an ethnic group from a small region on the border between Spain and France.
Mike Aramburu, 1935.
Many of those early herders carved their names on the white-barked aspen trees scattered through these hills.
This carving is by a herder named Jose Aguirre, Fred Oroz. He was one of the last herders. He carved very lightly, and his letters are very clear and sharp years later.
Together, these inscriptions represent a unique chapter of Northwest history.
And this tree is a picture of a woman's face with an elaborate hairstyle and the word Goigoichea. So perhaps this is a woman that the herder knew, and he immortalized her on the tree.
Today, just one band of 2,000 sheep grazes in the Steens, and it's managed by 2 Peruvian herders. The Basque herders are gone, and the only evidence that they were ever here is vanishing too. That's because an aspen lives little longer than a sheep herder, and most of the earliest images, carved between 1890 and 1930, have already disappeared.
No, I can't make anything out of that. No, I think it's just too far gone.
And even the more recent carvings, the only ones left, continue to degrade along with the trees that display them.
This is a carving of the Basque national symbol, and Euskadi is the name of the Basque homeland.
Carol Pedersen, who lives in Portland, calls these arborglyphs, a fancy name for tree carvings. Funded by a grant from the Oregon Archaeological Society, she hopes to document as many Steens arborglyphs as she can before these too are gone.
Unless they're recorded, they're going to pass away. No one will ever know that these people were here. After I finish the research and do the drawing and the photography, I try to put it together in a book, and just over time, showing it to different people, I've been able to get a lot of the carvings identified.
Used to be in the E. You got a pencil?
Okay.
She consults with local people of Basque descent to help her decipher the words and names.
Many of the people knew many of the herders, and were able to get a lot of the carvings identified, because some of them I had partial names, and they were filled in by someone who then recognized them. Fine, okay.
This is an A.
That's an A.
For Carol, this is more than an academic exercise, and that's why she enjoys the work so much.
And this was, it's a people's story. It's the people behind the carvings.
Oop. All I got to do is fall over and they think I'm drunk.
One of those people, now in his 70s, is Louis Yriarte. Louis was born in Oregon to a Basque sheep-herding family.
That cabin's right over here.
Yeah.
As a child, he and his brother spent summers here in the Steens, helping the men of the family, who came from Spain, tend sheep.
The first time I was here, I think I was 6 or 7 years old.
They used a homestead cabin for their base camp, a cabin Louis is revisiting with his wife and son after a long time away.
It's been almost 60 years.
There it is.
Recognize it?
Yep. Only thing is, somebody forgot to paint it. It used to be white. Okay. Here we go. I spent many a day here. Table set there. Our bed was rolled up right over there. And our cupboard for the dishes was right there. We eat a lot of stews and not deer meat. Herders didn't like deer meat.
Carol explores the surrounding trees.
Here's the Pete Elisondo, right here.
That Pete Elisondo, he homesteaded right here.
Now here's your Roman Yriarte. Here it is right here.
Roman is Louis' older brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, R-O-M-N.
July 1930 something.
We lay our bed out, and on a clear night, those stars look like they were just right on top of you. Well, there's very few people get to see that way. And then you sit on them rims, and we play cards, and we watch the buck deer, or the sage hens, or something else. Or if we wanted, we'd go fishing. There was always something to do, or carve trees, or some other thing. Or we'd go maybe someplace and visit another herder. Yeah, it wasn't dull life. No.
Here's one right here in a fallen tree. That's a Miguel-Inza.
Miguel-Inza.
Something up here too. We can't read it.
Looks like, oh, this is Jose Aguirre. Okay, Louis, you have to show us your carving.
Huh?
Do you remember where your carving was?
Should be right out this way.
Right there?
Yeah, someplace.
Okay.
Look down low on these.
C-H-E-L. Maybe a Michelle?
Did you have a sheep herder up here by the name of Michelle?
There was a Mitchell Harriet.
That's it.
That was the one I was telling you about that they took to the Army. I never see so many decorations on a man. Oh, Lord, and he was a good fella.
And he survived the war in...
Yeah, the only thing he didn't survive was those Camel cigarettes.
Oh, how do you win?
That one did it.
While many carvings are just names and dates, a few also include some artwork.
I know it was right out there where I had my carvings. I know they was there, right just about that high off in the ground. I think those trees all went.
Claudio Iturriaga, August 1768. He was a camp tender in Steens.
One of the most common names in the Steens aspen trees is Claudio Iturriaga. He was one of the last Basques to work up here, and his light touch with a knife made for long-lasting images, something he's still proud of.
1965. Pretty good for all these years.
Look at me.
Hey! Now that I look back and I see my name there, well, that's kind of interesting for me too.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I will choose a smooth skin, clear from birds. Right here, and this right here is about ideal.
When you carve real thin lines.
Yeah, I'm gonna demonstrate. You can hardly see it now. And next year, this will show a little bit, and then from there on, it'll show more and more every year. But if I carve it deep, or gouge that tree, pretty soon you're not going to be able to tell if it was somebody's name, or it's a scar, or a bull scratching their horns, or what.
The Basques became skilled herders, but they came to this country with little or no experience in sheep work, just a basic willingness to do it.
Really, the Basque people as a whole weren't sheep herders. They were seafaring people.
I'm from close to the ocean, but we didn't know much about the sheep.
Claudio left Spain at age 19.
The people were poor, so they started looking for some ways to make money, save little money, and then start on their own. So we thought, well, let's go to America. And they gave us a job herding sheep, and that's the only job we could do, because nobody else wanted to do that job.
Claudio doesn't like most of the graffiti that present-day hikers, campers, and hunters have cut into the trees. He says these serve no real purpose, unlike the carvings of those earlier sheep men.
Well, you have to say why we did it and when we did it. You know, there was nobody around here. You leave in that message for next guy that comes along, somebody like you that was herding sheep. When you came to that spot and see that's been somebody there, it feels like a home.
Yes.
Because you don't have a home. You're here miles and miles away from people. And you find a spot that's been somebody there, actually you will think, this is the home.
Most herders knew the other names they found on the trees.
Then when I go, man, he was standing right here doing this, so I'll go to next tree or below or the other side and put my name to associate with him.
Sure.
I don't know if that's different than a hunter doing the graffiti, but it was different to me. Viva España, Hereño. Hereño is the town that I grew up.
Not all the herders on the Steens were Basque. Irish, some Welsh. This tree carving by Johnny Smith.
This is Tepton, 58, Juntura,
Oregon. Tip, tip. I don't know the guy. I don't think was a sheep herder.
Some of the most interesting trees are also some of the most endangered.
This one particular tree is dead. It has 2 carvings. I love this tree because Jose Inda came to this tree 22 years after Pete Elisondo had written his name. And they started writing the date, and he got over to here and realized that the 6 wouldn't fit. And so he put the 6 under the 5. And the Pete Elisondo carving has a lightning strike right down the center of it. And the date, June 1934, that's the year of the Taylor Grazing Act.
The Taylor Grazing Act curtailed free-roaming livestock. So after 1934, the numbers of sheep and sheep herders here plummeted.
So that's an important tree, and pretty soon the whole tree will eventually fall over, and the whole thing will just decay.
Tomas Zavala. This is August 28, 1931. And it's a message for us that Tom, one of our buddies, was here one time, writing this name, probably herding sheep or tending camp or whatever he was doing. But he was here. That should be preserved and kept in a museum, because Tom Zavala is well known in Burns.
There was, at a certain time, prostitution going on the mountain.
This place is called Whorehouse Meadows.
It's pretty self-explaining, isn't it not? But it's like I tell Carol, that was there before I got here. But when I come here, the girls of ill repute, so let's put it that way. They come to Fish Lake, but we just little shavers. But they didn't pull nothing on us.
Oh, it's even worse than it was before. This tree, I would assume, was carved to tell sheep herders where they could go get medical attention if they found themselves with a disease. On this side it says, for cures, Ontario and then Oregon, for medical aid, and then the doctor's name, which is Bartlett, and there is a picture on the other side of a woman in a sexual pose.
Needless to say, some of the pictures and words on the trees are not for family television.
Don't blame me for that. But I'll tell you something. You take for any foreigner, when he comes over here, that's the first thing he learns, is all the X-rated stuff.
This tree is Patacon, and it's dated 17 June 1935.
Wherever she walks out here, she sees time taking its toll on the carvings.
This tree has 2 carvings on it. Last year, I recorded both carvings, and I believe they were both readable.
Oh, they're pretty hard to read. A few more years, they'll all be gone, you know it. Only thing, you're going to have it documented.
Face.
Carol knows she can only find and record some of the inscriptions here. Countless others will just disappear unnoticed.
This is a U made with a flourish for the name Yriarte.
Many of the names she's found on trees also appear on headstones in area cemeteries like this one in Burns.
They're all gone except for, well, my brother's still alive. Pete Elisondo's gone, and my uncle's gone. None of them's alive anymore. So I'm about the only one.
These are some of the Basque men who came to tend sheep, to work for a few years before going home.
I think all of us wanted to go back after we made some money and do something there, because that's where our parents were, all our families, all our friends, our language. That's intention of all of us, I believe. But it didn't happen to most of us.
They left their names on the trees as messages for the other Basques who would surely follow in their footsteps.
And they thought the Basque will be coming like they came all along, next 100 years. But never came, and it won't. And there was so many Basques here those days, and there's only few of us left. So it's one of those things that is going to come to the end.
Carol plans to publish a book of her findings with help from the Oregon Archaeological Society. And that's it for another edition of Oregon Field Guide. We're going to end our program tonight with a photo essay of Smith Rock State Park by our chief videographer, Todd Sonfleet.
Inspector Morse returns and The Wench is Dead mystery is next here on the television stations of OPB.
Funding for local broadcast of Oregon Field Guide has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. The Collins Foundation. The Collins Foundation is dedicated to improving the quality of life in Oregon. The Oregon Forest Resources Institute, encouraging you to rediscover Oregon's forests. See for yourself how forest practices are changing. Funding for this evening's programming on OPB has been provided by viewers like you and by